Passan tweeting out that the latest round of testing from the Miami Marlins found 4 new coronavirus positives. And sources familiar with the situation are telling this to ESPN. That brings the total over the last 5 days to 17 people, and Ken Rosenthal was the first to report the newest COVID-19 cases. Now, Jeff is going to join us a bit later on First Take to give us more of the lowdown. But for now, Max, I want to start with you. What is your reaction to all this news this morning?
That it was inevitable. It's unsurprising. Stephen A. Smith said on this show months ago that he thought baseball was a sport that could be played because it is a socially distant sport compared to, say, basketball or especially football. I wasn't so sure. I thought basketball could be played because there are far fewer participants, especially when testing was more scarce. You could get your hands maybe on enough tests to responsibly test everyone without taking tests away from those who really needed it. Testing is much more plentiful nowadays and available for everyone, so that's less of an issue. But more than any of that, the NBA, which was almost done with its season, it had like 7 more regular season games to go for the local TV revenue to fully vest, right? So they can get all that money, and then they could go straight to a playoffs and play their entire season in a bubble. Partly because there are fewer players involved, partly because they were almost done with their season, so it wasn't as long a time commitment, and partly because their commissioner, Adam Silver, who has rarely had taken a misstep, looked at the situation soberly. In the absence of vaccinations, the only way to really do this is a bubble. We've seen Dana White do it with the UFC. We've seen Top Rank do it with boxing, both in isolation. And even then, there have been many cancellations and postponements, even in a COVID-free environment, in a bubble, if you will, right? So the NBA, I always thought, had a real shot to crown a champion. But in baseball, when the Major League Baseball's Player Association, as was widely reported, and I'm generally almost always pro-labor, but in this case, that union said, no, we don't want to spend so much time apart from our families, can't do it, but they still wanted to play. This is what happens. It requires enormous sacrifice or deviation from what you feel is normal, from your normal routine, in order to successfully pull off a sports season. At least there are only 60 games, and so maybe we can get some of these games in, but I'm unsurprised by this result, even this early in the season. I'm unsurprised by the number of players who have it, given the fact that they're in too close proximity to each other when they're on the same team. And so here we are, 3 games in, there's a crisis.
I wonder how diligent they were when it came to the protocols, Max, not only on the baseball field, but off the baseball field. Because over the weekend, we saw a couple of walk-off situations where the players were crowding around each other as if it was partying like it was 2019, 2018, instead of understanding the protocols of 2020. So that's the one question that jumped out to me when I heard about all the outbreak that happened with the Miami Marlins. How diligent were they on and off the baseball field to make sure? Because this is what the players wanted. They signed off on this to get back on the baseball field, and the owners were more than happy to give them what they want after a contentious back and forth between the players and the owners. But if you're not following the protocols that were put in place by Major League Baseball that you signed off on as a player, then you're not doing yourself any favors, especially in the hot spot that Florida has become when it comes to COVID-19. So I think it's a complete shame that 17 players have tested positive with the Miami Marlins organization and other people involved in that organization. But if you're not doing your due diligence to make sure you maintain the protocols on off the baseball field, Max, you're completely right. Nobody should be surprised that this actually happened. But I wonder how much the players were not helping themselves by not paying attention to what's going on when it comes to a pandemic and COVID-19. And that has absolutely nothing to do with baseball, anything to do with sports from that standpoint.
I'm going to piggyback on that, Freddie, and not to the standpoint of what goes on the field or once you get into the stadium, because from what I've heard from coaches, from players, is that they are trying to follow as best protocol as they can. Yes, we've seen the walk-offs, we've seen the celebrations. My concern is outside the ballpark. Are the players being vigilant of each other? Are they taking care of each other? Are they going straight from the ballpark to their homes? Or are they stopping somewhere else? That's the part that a lot of players, and remember, you have different age gaps. You have players that have families with, if it's with grown kids, but at the same time, you have players that aren't married, that are single, that maybe they don't know what, how to behave outside the ballpark. Are they seeing friends or not? Are they staying confined? And those are the big questions that a lot of the coaches have because these are more of the high-risk people that are involved in this. And then you have players that also see their parents. So there's a lot of uncertainty outside the playing field than there is inside the playing field. And to take it a step further, baseball, you can't do what basketball has done, what soccer has done. You play this every day. You got 60 games in 66 days. Where are you going to be able to find a facility to be able to hold not only the 60 players, but the staff members, the front office members? It's a big entity, and plus you're getting on airplanes. And from what I've heard with the Miami Marlins is once you get on that airplane and you have one of those infected players, I want to see the seating chart, because I guarantee you that seating chart is probably exploited right there with those players on who tested positive and who did not.
And that's why Arizona was proposed. Even if you needed 2 or 3 or 4 bubbles, you cannot be traveling on airplanes. And guys, this is not even about player safety. This is about safety of the most vulnerable among us, the elderly, those with underlying conditions. That's to whom this disease is most dangerous. And so what is it really about? What's a bubble really about? Contact tracing. If you have a vaccine, if you can vaccinate the population, that's fine. But if you don't, then you must locate the virus and then isolate it. The problem in this environment, where there is no bubble, is contact tracing is basically impossible. What are you going to do? You got to find out where every single member on the team has been when they go home? That's ridiculous, and they become vectors for the disease, and then it spreads. Again, it's not that we don't want anyone to have it. Of course not. But Major League Baseball players, in theory, are safer from the virus than others, than the elderly, than those with underlying conditions. And that's the point of being careful during this pandemic.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.